This is our first guest episode for Culture REfit, and so thrilled to have her join us because it really is setting the tone for everything that we'll be talking about and the kind of conversations that we want to have. We are intentionally starting at the beginning of Lunar New Year, the fire horse. The fire horse has been so important in this launch because I really realized how the snake was being released over the last year as I kind of undid and shed so many identities and ways of working and living. We're using the fire horse as a global metaphor. So Ingrid Hu Dahl is an author, a speaker, a leadership coach, whose memoir, Sun Shining on Morning Snow, traces her journey through identity, loss, and the courage to live boldly. She really represents the multi-identities and cultural identities that we want to explore. So welcome, Ingrid, to this episode. You're our first guest on Culture REfit, and it was really important for us to start this.
Oh my goodness, thank you for that, Carol. The Year of the Fire Horse is really powerful as you've teed up. And actually, I'm just going to show people. This is a horse that my grandmother, my Nai, gave to me when I was much younger, because I have a whole journey as a young kid into my teens with horses and communicating with horses. And horses have a really large heart center. But the fire horse here is powerful because the last time we had a fire horse, they come every 60 years, was actually in 1966. And in 1966, for especially the Asian culture, it was very superstitious to have a girl born in that year. A lot of people delayed. I think in Japan, it was 25% of people delayed having birth in that year because they didn't want to have a very bold female who maybe wouldn't get married, who wouldn't be, supported in their future because of the superstitiousness of that boldness. And I see this as a reclamation for us in 2026, for women, for people of color alike. This is the year to reclaim that tenfold and say, we are meant to celebrate our enter into the arena, as you call it, in this bold, fierce way.
Thousands of individuals and hundreds of organizations. She's also the founder of the BIPOC Leader Lab and author of 3 best-selling books, including the recent release, Fire and Silence, which we're going to be talking about today. We like to ask people to just get us comfortable talking about our own personal culture and our identities, is to ask you about how do you describe your own personal cultural identities?
Identifying as somebody who is, identifying as a woman of color and immigrant, those are the words I first used. I use them first because they've been the most defining of my sense of self, and not because I chose them, but because they were placed on me. So I was born in Iran, the hot spot of the world currently. And I came to Canada. Let me just say, the last time the U.S. intervened in Iran forced me to depart my home country. So now I'm watching this kind of the new iteration of intervention. But I moved to Canada when I was 9, or I'm 9, and I had in Iran took for granted that my culture and my racial features were just normal. So it was only, when I immigrated to a very small conservative town in Canada, white dominant, that I realized for the first time that I wasn't I was brown. I wasn't seen as Canadian or North American. And in fact, that wasn't neutral. It was seen as threatening and dangerous and inferior. And those early years and it was a very pivotal age for me, were traumatizing because it wasn't just, getting my name mispronounced, but it was being the social pariah. No one would make eye contact. I was spat on even by kids in the grades younger than myself. And of course, it wasn't just limited to school. It was the broader community. And so I very quickly realized that to be Iranian, to be brown, to be foreign is a liability. And of course, like many immigrants, I tried to be as white as possible, highly educated, hyper articulate, worked really hard. And as I grew up, as I came into the world and started my career, realizing that no amount of trying to be white was ever going to be white enough. I could kind of be white adjacent, but I was I was and that was really the start of my reckoning with power, with identity. Well, not the start, but I guess doing deeper dives and um, reclaiming my identity, my marginalized aspects of my identity as a source of power.
We have a guest on today that's going to take us to some of the areas and questions that we've been curious about. What happens in the room where it happens? What are the conversations that C-suite leaders are having about culture and change? So Ron Thomas is a global CHRO, a workforce architect. He's a leadership strategist and has worked for all different types of companies, from family-owned to startups and multinationals around the world. Thank you, Ron, for joining us in this conversation. Glad to have you here. So I wanted to start the conversation by talking about your journey, the milestones as a senior C-suite leader, Black American man coming from the US and moving to Dubai. What was the culture shock? This is about culture refit and how we navigate. What surprised you the most in that shift when you came so long ago?
Yeah, it was a long time ago. I think the major shift was coming from one culture and having a mindset, a New York City mindset, and coming to an Arabic country where there were more structures and rules in place. Whereas New York was kind of freelance, you try this, you try. Totally different culture. And it was the best decision I've ever made. And that comes back to just exploring opportunities for people that are doing a job and they don't really like the job. What would you like to explore? Explore something.
What I find most compelling and why we asked her to be here is that her expertise isn't just professional, it's deeply personal. Shilpa, welcome to Culture Fit. So Shilpa, let's get started. To ground us in the human experience of this work, it's humans that do this work. Wanted to start by understanding what your own lived experience is. What is your culture code, as we say? We talk about culture codes as being our own cultural identities and lived experiences that give us a lens through this work. So can you share a little bit about what your culture code is that informs the work that you do?
Sure. Yeah. So it's kind of weird. Maybe it isn't weird, but my parents were born and brought up in Nairobi in Kenya, and came to the UK in the late 60s, early 70s. At that time, and we're talking late 70s, we were one of a handful of non-white families, and especially in the village that we were in. We were literally the only brown people in the village. And I think even now there's only about four families maybe. My dad still lives there. So I was brought up surrounded by white people because we didn't have any family nearby. So it was just my mum, my dad, my older sister and me. And then lots of English people, lots of old English people. So I was the only Indian girl in my school, the only Indian person in my primary school. And there was racism at the school, and I really wasn't equipped to handle it because I didn't really have any sort of safe spaces beyond my parents, and actually they were useless in trying to help me deal with racism. Where the racism wasn't necessarily shouted out loud, it was there. Racism exists everywhere, doesn't it, amongst all different classes within society. It just so happens within the upper middle classes it's spikier, I would say, because it's kind of sneakier. And there were, I remember a time that I was spat on when I came out of my maths class. So I felt like, obviously I felt like an other, but I didn't have the words to express that at that time. I didn't have the vocabulary. Nobody was really, it was very much a focus on assimilation at that point. It was kind of a bit of a crappy time, actually. Like, people will look back at their childhoods with like fond memories of like, oh, I had a magical childhood, and I've never felt like that. And that is down to being the only brown person in many of the spaces that I've been in. When all is said and done, class is really nothing to do with wealth. It's to do with your background, your upbringing, your heritage, your ancestry. So I think some people have been lulled into a false sense of security that, oh, okay, because we're on, economically we can match, or we're doing better even, we're part of that society. And I just think that's a myth. I don't think that will ever be the case.
Who you'd like us to cover and what you want us to talk about. Thank you for joining.